The 25 Most Amazing Paintings by Pedro Pablo Rubens. Number 25. Diana the Huntress. Circa 1615. The work, Diana the Huntress, created around 1615, is one of the most emblematic pieces that portray the mythological ideal of the Roman goddess Diana. In the context of the 17th century, this painting reflects the Renaissance and Baroque interest in reinterpreting classical mythology, but with a technical and symbolic approach that went beyond simple representation. In this period, European art was deeply influenced by a revival of Greco-Roman themes, fused with a rich tradition of illumination and theatricality typical of the nascent Baroque. Technically, the work stands out for its masterful use of chiaroscuro, where the central figure of Diana emerges from a dark background, highlighting her silhouette with golden lights that evoke a divine atmosphere. Every detail, from the metallic shine of her quiver to the texture of her clothing, demonstrates a technical mastery of oil painting. The composition directs the eye to the bow that Diana holds, a symbol of her role as a hunter and protector, while the surrounding animals and vegetation reinforce the goddess's link with nature. In the artist's career, this work occupies a prominent place, not only for its technical virtuosity, but also for the way it managed to humanize a mythological figure. Diana is not simply a distant goddess. Here she is presented with a balance between strength and serenity, suggesting a more accessible connection with the viewer. The choice to represent this moment of calm before the action reinforces the artist's ability to capture complex narratives in a single scene. One detail that does not go unnoticed is the use of color, particularly warm tones that contrast with the dark surroundings. This contrast, typical of the Baroque, intensifies the theatricality of the scene, transporting the viewer to a world between the earthly and the divine. Diana the Huntress is not only a technical masterpiece, but a portal into an era's fascination with mythological tales and their artistic reinterpretation. Number 24. The Assumption of the Virgin. Circa 1626. Created in 1626, The Assumption of the Virgin is a work that exemplifies the deep connection between religious faith and art in the 17th century. In a period when the Counter-Reformation movement sought to inspire devotion through art, this painting stands as a prominent example of sacred art that combines majesty and spiritual transcendence. The scene depicts the moment when the Virgin Mary is raised to heaven, surrounded by angels and enveloped in a heavenly atmosphere that symbolizes divine glory. The composition is a marvel of visual harmony, with an ascending structure that guides the gaze from the earthly faithful below to the radiant figure of the Virgin above. The author used a palette of vibrant colors, predominantly blue, gold, and white, to create a feeling of light and purity. The use of brushstrokes and the play of light and shadow reinforce the idea of a space that transcends the human, transporting the viewer to a moment of sublime revelation. This work marked a high point in the painter's career, showing his ability to balance the narrative requirements of the Church with his own artistic style. The delicacy with which the folds of the vestments have been rendered, as well as the serene expression of the Virgin, reveal an exceptional sensitivity to express deep emotions. The influence of this piece extended beyond its original context, serving as an inspiration for other religious artists of the time. A fascinating detail is the treatment of the angels' faces, each with a unique expression that suggests different facets of heavenly joy. This meticulous focus on human details within a divine narrative makes The Assumption of the Virgin a work that masterfully captures both the spiritual and the earthly. Number 23. The Earthly Paradise with the Fall of Man. Circa 1615. Painted around 1615, The Earthly Paradise with the Fall of Man is a work that combines natural beauty and a profound moral message. Set in Eden, this painting portrays the pivotal moment when Adam and Eve succumb to temptation, surrounded by a setting of natural splendor that reflects the perfection of divine creation. In the 17th century, depictions of paradise were both an exploration of nature and a reminder of human frailty. The artist displays an impressive mastery of composition, placing Adam and Eve in the center, beneath the tree of knowledge, while the details of the surroundings, the lush vegetation, the exotic animals, and the meandering river, envelop the protagonists in a world of life and abundance. The contrast between the serenity of the landscape and the act of disobedience adds an emotional and philosophical dimension to the scene. This work is not only a technical achievement, but also a reflection on the human condition. The use of vibrant colors and attention to detail in each natural element reflect a deep knowledge of anatomy and botany, adding authenticity to the landscape. In addition, the snake, a symbol of sin, is painted with a level of detail that intensifies its ominous presence in the painting. The impact of this work on art history is indisputable, as it strikes a balance between religious symbolism and the representation of nature. When contemplating the painting, the viewer is invited not only to admire its beauty, but also to reflect on the consequences of human decisions. The Earthly Paradise with the Fall of Man remains a central piece in the artistic exploration of biblical themes. Number 22. The Birth of the Milky Way, circa 1636 and 1637. Created between 1636 and 1637, The Birth of the Milky Way is a work that blends mythology and science in a fascinating way. Inspired by the Greek myth that tells of the origin of the Milky Way from the milk spilled by Hera, this painting becomes a celebration of the cosmos and human imagination in the 17th century. In an era where art and science were beginning to dialogue, this work stands out for its bold representation of celestial themes. The composition features Hera at the center, with an expression of wonder as milk gushes from her breast, transforming into a luminous river that meanders toward the sky. The colors used are ethereal, with shades of pearly white, deep blue, and gold that capture the majesty of celestial space. Around, mythological figures and stars intertwine, creating a scene that is both intimate and expansive. For the artist, this work represented a technical and conceptual challenge, as he managed to combine the dynamic movement of the Baroque with a subject charged with symbolism. The precision in the anatomical details of the mythological figures, together with the delicacy in the treatment of celestial textures, demonstrates a remarkable virtuosity. This painting is also a testament to the interest of the time in understanding the universe, incorporating elements that celebrate both mythology and astronomical observation. A curious detail of this work is the way the stars are represented as almost palpable flashes of light, which gives the scene a magical and tangible quality. The Birth of the Milky Way is not only a work of art, but a bridge between worlds, where the earthly and the cosmic converge in a unique visual narrative. Number 21. The Miracles of St. Ignatius of Loyola, from the year 1617 to the year 1618. Between 1617 and 1618, the Miracles of St. Ignatius of Loyola was created to honor the founder of the Society of Jesus and highlight the wonders associated with his saintliness. At the height of the Baroque, this work served as an instrument of the Church to inspire faith and devotion, using visual theatricality to capture the attention of the faithful. Each element in the painting is carefully designed to convey the greatness of the miracles performed by St. Ignatius. The main scene shows St. Ignatius in a gesture of intercession, surrounded by figures representing people healed by his divine intervention. The dynamism of the composition is characteristic of the Baroque, with diagonal lines and dramatic lighting reinforcing the miraculous character of the events portrayed. The warm color palette and the heavenly light effects around the saint contribute to creating an atmosphere of sacredness. In the author's career, this work was an outstanding example of how art could serve as a tool for the Counter-Reformation. It was not just about depicting miracles, but doing so in a way that would move and convince the viewer of divine intervention. The attention to detail in the characters' expressions, from amazement to gratitude, adds a human dimension that connects the viewer to the narrative. An intriguing aspect of the painting is the inclusion of symbolic elements, such as St. Ignatius' pilgrim's staff, which reinforce his image as a spiritual guide. The Miracles of St. Ignatius of Loyola is a work that continues to inspire, not only for its technical excellence, but for the emotional and spiritual strength that emanates from its composition. Number 20. The Wedding of Peleus and Thetis. Circa 1636. In the context of the 17th century, the wedding of Peleus and Thetis emerges as a pictorial testimony to the height of the Baroque, an era characterized by ornamental richness and the exaltation of emotions in art. This work was created in 1636 by the Flemish painter Jacob Jordaens, a disciple and contemporary of Paul Rubens, who set the course for European painting. Inspired by Greek mythology, the painting portrays the wedding between the mortal Peleus and the Nereid Thetis, parents of the legendary Achilles. In this work, Jordaens employs an exuberant visual language, saturated with warm colors and dynamic compositions that emphasize the festive and transcendental nature of the event. Technically, the use of chiaroscuro and light contrasts are fundamental to the visual narrative. The main figures, placed in the center, are illuminated by a spotlight that highlights their facial expressions and movements. This resource generates a theatrical atmosphere that directs the viewer's attention to the symbolic details present in the scene: the Olympian deities, the dancing fauns, and the nymphs surrounding the couple. Jordaens' brush glides masterfully to give the fabrics, fruits, and landscapes an almost palpable texture, achieving a sense of depth that adds a scenic dimension to the work. The significance of the marriage of Peleus and Thetis is not limited to its impeccable technical execution. This painting encapsulates the influence of Rubens on Jordaens, who adopted and adapted his master's monumental style to develop an artistic voice of his own. In this work, Jordaens not only depicts a mythological scene, but also explores universal themes such as the celebration of life, union, and destiny. His ability to integrate mythological elements with an accessible visual language positioned him as one of the great exponents of Flemish Baroque art. A fascinating detail of this work is the presence of small elements that allude to the fragility of the moment: fruits about to fall from tables and furtive glances between the guests. These details invite the viewer to reflect on the tension between the ephemeral and the eternal, a duality that defines the Baroque in its purest essence. Number 19. The Death of Seneca. Circa 1615. Created during the early 17th century, The Death of Seneca reflects a profound meditation on Stoic philosophy and the tragic end of the famous Roman thinker Seneca. This work by the Spanish painter José de Ribera, known as El Españoleto, captures a moment of intense emotional charge and historical narrative: Seneca's forced suicide under the orders of the Emperor Nero. Ribera, faithful to Baroque drama, places the scene in a dark and austere environment that contrasts with the luminosity of the philosopher's body, which seems to radiate a tragic serenity. In technical terms, Ribera makes masterful use of tenebrism, a technique he learned under the influence of Caravaggio. The light highlights Seneca's aging musculature, echoing the physical and spiritual tension of his final moments. The thick strokes and earthy tones give the canvas an almost sculptural texture, underlining the vulnerability of the human body in the face of the impositions of power. Through a raw and realistic approach, Ribera does not idealize Seneca, but rather humanizes him, endowing the work with a striking authenticity. The importance of this painting in Ribera's career lies in its ability to combine narrative, philosophical and visual elements in a single canvas. The death of Seneca becomes a bridge between art and reflection, evoking questions about dignity, sacrifice and morality in times of oppression. This work consolidated Ribera as one of the great masters of the Spanish Golden Age, with an artistic approach that influenced later generations. A detail that invites contemplation is Seneca's fixed gaze, directed towards a point outside the frame. This resource creates an implicit dialogue between the philosopher and the spectator, who becomes a witness to a lesson in fortitude in the face of adversity. Number 18. Self-portrait with his wife and son. Circa 1638. Set against the vibrant backdrop of the 17th century, Self-Portrait with Wife and Child marks an introspective turn in Jacob Jourdain's oeuvre. Unlike his larger mythological and religious compositions, this intimate painting reflects the artist's personal world, highlighting the balance between the domestic and the professional. Painted in 1638, this self-portrait offers a window into the everyday life of Jourdains, who is depicted alongside his wife Catharina van Noort and their son. The work conveys a mix of familial affection and artistic pride, encapsulating a moment of harmony in his life. Technically, the painting stands out for its warm color palette and subtle use of chiaroscuro to model faces and textures. Jourdains combines meticulous attention to detail, such as fabrics and trim, with a looser brushstroke in the background, creating a contrast that draws the eye towards the protagonists. The gestures and expressions of the characters are particularly noteworthy, as they convey a sense of authenticity and emotional closeness that was uncommon at the time. The significance of this self-portrait lies in its ability to humanize the artist, presenting him not only as a creator, but also as a husband and father. This intimate approach adds a personal dimension to Jourdain's work, setting it apart from his more grandiloquent compositions. At the same time, the painting evidences his technical mastery and his ability to capture both the individual essence and the emotional connection between the figures. A curious detail is the inclusion of a book in Catharina's hands, a symbol of wisdom and stability, which contrasts with the child's relaxed posture, representing generational continuity and family legacy. Number 17. The Four Continents. Circa 1615. The Four Continents, painted in 1615, is a monumental work by Paul Rubens that reflects the Eurocentric worldview of the 17th century. This allegorical painting depicts Europe, Asia, Africa, and America as female figures surrounded by exotic animals and symbolic elements that allude to the riches and characteristics of each region. The work stands out for its visual opulence and dynamic composition, distinctive features of Rubens' Baroque style. The use of vibrant colors and luminous contrasts gives the scene a sense of vitality and movement. Each continent is represented with unique attributes: Europe, as a center of knowledge and power; Asia, with references to spirituality and spices; Africa, surrounded by wild fauna; and America, accompanied by flora and animals unknown to Europeans of the time. Rubens combines mythological and natural elements to create a visual narrative that exalts the diversity and richness of the known world. This work is significant in Rubens' career because it synthesizes his interest in mythology, geography, and politics. It also reflects the curiosity and desire for exploration that defined the 17th century, a period marked by European colonial expansion. Through The Four Continents, Rubens not only celebrates cultural diversity, but also legitimizes the imperialist vision of his time, making the work a historical and artistic document of great value. An intriguing detail is the interaction between the figures and the animals, which seem to engage in a cosmic dance. This element adds a playful dimension to the work, inviting the viewer to discover new layers of meaning with each observation. Number 16. The triumphal entry of Henry IV into Paris. From 1627 to 1630. Painted between 1627 and 1630, Paul Rubens, The Triumphal Entry of Henry IV into Paris is a grand work that celebrates a pivotal moment in French history. This painting is part of a series commissioned by Marie de Medici to commemorate the life and achievements of her husband, King Henry IV. In this work, Rubens combines historical realism with mythological allegory, depicting Henry IV as a victorious hero returning to Paris after consolidating his power and pacifying the kingdom. The composition is characterized by its monumentality and dynamism, with figures that seem to move to the rhythm of a triumphal procession. Rubens uses a rich palette of golds, reds, and blues to convey the majesty of the event. The central figure of the king, enveloped in a heavenly glow, is surrounded by soldiers, citizens, and allegorical figures representing peace and prosperity. This approach gives the work an almost theatrical dimension, capturing both the emotion of the moment and its historical significance. In the context of Rubens' career, this painting is an example of his ability to fuse history and mythology, creating works that transcend the merely decorative. It also reflects his mastery of space and visual narrative, consolidating him as one of the most influential artists of his time. A fascinating detail is the inclusion of small gestures and expressions on the faces of the secondary characters, which add emotional depth to the scene and reveal Rubens' ability to capture the complexity of human interactions. Number 15. Helena Formant in her wedding dress. 1630. In 1630, in the 17th century, Paul Rubens painted one of the most iconic works of his personal and professional life, Helena Formant in her wedding dress. This portrait is characterized not only by its masterful technical execution, but also by its intimate connection with the painter, since Helena Formant, the young woman portrayed, was his second wife and muse in his later years. In the portrait, Rubens uses a warm and luminous range of colors, showing the delicacy of the skin and fabrics, while emphasizing Helene's grace and youth. The composition focuses on her figure, radiating elegance and purity, a clear allusion to the traditional values of marriage at the time. The historical context of the 17th century was deeply influenced by the social and cultural changes brought about by the Counter-Reformation. Rubens, as a Baroque painter and a fervent Catholic, used his art to convey messages of optimism and spirituality. However, this work reflects a more personal and private approach, far removed from the religious and political themes that dominated much of his career. Helena, in her white silk wedding dress adorned with gold embroidery, represents a feminine ideal of the time: youth, purity, and wealth, all captured with exceptional technical precision. Rubens was a master of texture, and in this painting, the detail of the fabrics and folds of the dress is a testament to his unparalleled skill. Each embroidered thread seems to have a life of its own, and the way the light plays across the different surfaces gives a sense of three-dimensionality that only a Baroque master could achieve. This level of detail, coupled with Helene's serene and confident gaze, makes the work transcend mere portraiture and become a declaration of love and devotion. A fascinating detail of this painting is how Rubens incorporates subtle symbolic elements to celebrate their married life. For example, the bouquet of flowers that Helena is holding can be interpreted as a symbol of fertility and union. Furthermore, the carefully balanced composition and the gentle movement of the figure create an air of tranquility that contrasts with the dynamic and dramatic compositions typical of the Baroque. Number 14. The landing of Marie de Medicis in the port of Marseille. Around the years 1622 and 1625. Between 1622 and 1625, in the 17th century, Paul Rubens created one of the most ambitious series of paintings in the history of art, the Marie de Medicis series. The most notable piece in this collection is the landing of Marie de Medicis in the port of Marseille, a monumental painting celebrating the Queen's arrival in France in 1600 to marry King Henry IV. This historical event, although political in nature, was depicted by Rubens with a theatrical and divine touch, exalting Mary as an almost mythological figure, worthy of adoration and respect. The painting combines Baroque splendor with allegorical and symbolic elements. In the composition, Mary appears at the center of the scene, descending from her boat, surrounded by figures representing earthly and divine power. The presence of Neptune and the Nereids symbolizes divine protection of the sea, while the Renaissance architecture in the background reflects the cultural splendor of the time. Rubens uses a rich palette of gold, blue, and crimson tones to emphasize the grandeur of the moment, while the dynamic movement of the figures creates an effect of drama and celebration. The work was commissioned by Marie de Medicis herself to immortalize her life and legitimize her power as queen. In the political context of the 17th century, art was not only a tool of aesthetic expression, but also a means of propaganda to consolidate the power of European monarchies. Rubens, known for his ability to convey political messages through allegories, masterfully fulfilled this commission, combining his technical mastery with a deep understanding of the power dynamics of the time. An interesting detail about this work is how Rubens manages to balance the divine and the earthly in one scene. Although Mary is surrounded by mythological figures, her calm posture and direct gaze convey a sense of humanity and determination. This approach reinforces her image as a leader who, although favored by the gods, also possesses the human qualities necessary to rule successfully. Number 13. The Rape of Europa, circa 1628 and 1629. In 1628, in the 17th century, Paul Rubens reinterpreted one of the oldest myths of Greek mythology, the Rape of Europa. This work, created around the years 1628 and 1629, shows the moment when Zeus, transformed into a white bull, seduces and abducts Europa, taking her across the sea to Crete. The painting is a classic example of the Baroque style, full of movement, emotion, and sensuality, distinctive characteristics of Rubens' work. At the center of the composition, Europa is depicted as a voluptuous female figure, characteristic of the canons of beauty of the time. Her dress, which seems to be blown by the wind, reveals Rubens' mastery in the representation of movement and the texture of fabrics. The bull, with an almost human gaze, reflects the duality of Zeus, while the figures accompanying Europa add dynamism and complexity to the scene. The vibrant color palette and the interplay between light and shadow reinforce the dramatic and romantic atmosphere of the painting. This myth, loaded with symbolism, was reinterpreted several times during the Renaissance and Baroque periods, but Rubens' version stands out for its emotional focus and attention to detail. In the historical context of the 17th century, European art was deeply influenced by the ideas of humanism and the exploration of classical myths as vehicles for reflecting on human nature and ideals of beauty. A fascinating detail of this work is how Rubens uses composition to guide the viewer's gaze through the scene. From Europa's gaze to the direction of the bull, every element seems to be in motion, creating a sense of continuity and narrative that captures the essence of the myth. Number 12. The Union of Earth and Water. Circa 1618. In 1618, in the 17th century, Paul Rubens created the union of earth and water, an allegory celebrating prosperity and abundance as a result of the union of opposing forces. This deeply symbolic work depicts two central figures representing earth and water, surrounded by natural elements that emphasize the richness and fertility of their alliance. The balanced and harmonious composition reflects Rubens' technical mastery and his ability to represent abstract concepts through the human figure. The earth, represented as a voluptuous woman, holds a cornucopia, while water, in male form, seems to be pouring out riches in a constant flow. The interaction between the two figures symbolizes the harmony between natural elements, a recurring theme in Baroque art, which sought to convey messages of order and balance in times of chaos. In historical context, this work can be interpreted as a celebration of the peace and prosperity that Rubens yearned for in Europe, a region divided by religious and political conflicts. The inclusion of mythological and natural elements reflects the influence of Renaissance humanism, which saw nature as a source of inspiration and knowledge. An interesting detail of this work is how Rubens uses the play of light and shadow to highlight the textures of the bodies and natural elements. This approach not only reinforces the sense of three-dimensionality, but also creates an atmosphere of serenity and plenitude that complements the allegorical message of the work. Number 11. The Hippopotamus Hunt. Circa 1615 and 1616. Between 1615 and 1616, in the 17th century, Paul Rubens painted The Hippopotamus Hunt, a work that captures the intensity and drama of a real hunt. Combining realism with Baroque theatricality, this painting shows a group of hunters facing off against a hippopotamus and a crocodile in a fierce struggle for survival. The dynamic and chaotic composition reflects Rubens' ability to capture movement and emotion in a scene. Each figure, from the hunters to the animals, is depicted in stunning detail, showing the strength and tension of the moment. The color palette, dominated by dark and earthy tones, reinforces the dangerous and wild atmosphere of the scene, while the play of light and shadow creates an effect of depth and realism that captivates the viewer. In historical context, royal hunts were important events in 17th century Europe, symbolizing man's power and dominion over nature. Rubens, as a court painter, used this work to demonstrate his technical skill and ability to capture complex, action-packed scenes. A fascinating detail of this work is how Rubens manages to convey the tension of the hunt through the expressions and postures of the figures. Each hunter seems to be at the limit of his abilities, while the animals, especially the hippopotamus, seem to challenge their pursuers with impressive ferocity. This combination of realism and drama makes the work one of the most striking of Rubens' career. Number 10. Daniel in the Lion's Den. Circa 1614 and 1616. Created in the 17th century, this Rubens masterpiece depicts one of the most striking biblical episodes, the prophet Daniel thrown into a den full of lions. The historical context in which Rubens developed this painting was marked by the rise of the Baroque, a style that sought drama, dynamism, and emotion, values that are reflected here in every detail. The work not only shows the artist's skill in capturing the anatomy and movement of lions, but also highlights his ability to convey serenity and faith in the face of Daniel, who remains in an attitude of prayer while the imposing and threatening animals seem to be subdued by a divine force. Rubens uses chiaroscuro masterfully, focusing the light on Daniel while shadows envelop the lions. This contrast not only draws attention to the main character, but also symbolizes the struggle between faith and adversity. The vigorous brushstrokes and warm colors enhance the drama of the scene, while the anatomical details of the lions reflect a deep study of nature. Each animal has a unique posture, which adds dynamism and variety to the composition. In Rubens' career, this work stands out for its combination of biblical narrative and technical mastery. His ability to bring such a complex scene to life reaffirms his position as one of the great exponents of the Baroque. The composition manages to balance the emotional tension of the story with the majesty of the pictorial elements, making it a testament to his artistic genius. A fascinating detail is the way Rubens humanizes the lions, giving them expressions that seem almost reflective. This could be interpreted as an attempt by the artist to show divine intervention in a visual language that was accessible to the viewers of his time, reinforcing the spiritual message of the work. Number 9. Samson and Delilah, around 1609 and 1610. Set in the 17th century, Samson and Delilah is a work that encapsulates the drama and sensuality characteristic of the Baroque. Rubens portrays the moment when Samson, asleep on Delilah's lap, is about to be betrayed, while a servant stealthily cuts his hair, a symbol of his strength. The scene is enveloped in an atmosphere of tension and deceit, with the dim lighting focused on the faces of the protagonists and accentuating the intrigue of the moment. Rubens employs an extraordinary use of color and texture to convey the sensuality of Delilah and the vulnerability of Samson. The use of sumptuous fabrics and meticulous details in embroidery and jewelry reflect luxury and decadence, while facial expressions and body postures subtly communicate the emotions of the characters. The figure of Delilah, with her calculating gaze, contrasts with the vulnerability of Samson, creating a complex dynamic that captivates the viewer. In Rubens' career, this work marks his mastery of visual narrative, combining biblical elements with a theatrical approach. The carefully balanced composition draws the viewer's attention to the act of betrayal, but also to secondary details, such as the expressions of the accomplices and the decoration of the surroundings, which enrich the story. The most intriguing detail is the symbolism that Rubens manages to include in the elements of the painting, from the presence of a lit candle, which could represent the fragility of life, to the contrast between light and shadow, which reinforces the struggle between good and evil. Number 8. The Garden of Love, from the year 1630 to the year 1635. Created in the 17th century, this work is a celebration of life, love, and sensuality, encapsulated in Rubens' exuberant style. The Garden of Love depicts an idyllic space where several figures, dressed in opulent attire, enjoy a bucolic setting filled with flowers, fountains, and statues. Inspired by the Renaissance ideal of combining nature with humanity, the painting stands out for its vibrant and festive atmosphere, typical of the mythological and allegorical themes that Rubens often addressed. Rubens uses a rich palette of warm, bright tones to capture the joy and vitality of the scene. The fluid brushstrokes and dynamic composition guide the viewer's eye through the many details, from the flirtatious gestures of the figures to the floral decorations that decorate the surroundings. Each character seems to interact organically with the others, creating a visual narrative that reflects the harmony and pleasure of community life. In Rubens' career, this work is considered a paradigmatic example of his humanistic approach. The inclusion of mythological figures and symbolic elements, such as the statues of Venus and Cupid, underlines the connection between earthly and divine love, a recurring theme in his work. In addition, the representation of textures, such as the softness of the fabrics and the transparency of the water, shows his technical mastery. A curious aspect of this painting is how Rubens incorporates elements from his personal life. Some historians suggest that the figures depicted could be inspired by people close to the artist, which adds an intimate dimension to this already richly meaningful work. Number 7. The Adoration of the Magi. From the year 1609 to the year 1629. Painted during the 17th century, Rubens's The Adoration of the Magi is a work that captures the majesty and mystery of the biblical tale of the Magi visiting the infant Jesus. The scene is full of movement and drama, hallmarks of the Baroque. The three kings, with their rich attire and exotic gifts, kneel before the child, while a multitude of figures and animals fill the space, creating a dense and lively composition. Rubens' technique shines in the use of intense colors and contrasts of light and shadow, which draw attention to the infant Jesus as the center of the scene. The characters' facial expressions and broad gestures add an emotional dimension that highlights the reverence and devotion of the participants. The artist also demonstrates his skill in depicting different textures, from the softness of fabrics to the hardness of metallic objects and the shine of jewelry. In the context of Rubens' work, this painting is an example of how he combined the influence of Italian masters such as Caravaggio and Titian with his personal style. The complex composition and masterful use of color and light make it one of the most iconic works of his career. A curiosity about this work is the level of detail in the costumes of the three wise men, which reflect a deep interest in foreign cultures and luxury objects, a subject that fascinated European society at the time. Number 6. The Massacre of the Innocents. From the year 1611 to the year 1612. In the 17th century, Rubens created The Massacre of the Innocents, a harrowing work depicting the slaughter ordered by Herod in search of the newborn Messiah. This painting is a striking example of Baroque drama and emotional intensity, with figures in frenetic motion and expressions of terror and despair dominating the composition. Rubens's color palette, with dark and warm tones, reinforces the atmosphere of chaos and suffering. The light, used strategically, illuminates the scenes of struggle and despair, creating a contrast that intensifies the emotional charge. Each figure is carefully drawn, from the soldiers with their violent gestures to the mothers desperately trying to protect their children, showing the artist's ability to capture the complexity of human emotions. This work is fundamental in Rubens' career because it shows his ability to address historical and biblical themes with a psychological depth that transcends the visual. His ability to combine anatomical realism with a powerful narrative positions him as one of the greatest artists of his time. A surprising detail in this painting is how Rubens manages to balance the chaos of the scene with a harmonious composition, guiding the viewer through the tragedy without losing the sense of structure and balance. Number 5. The Rape of the Daughters of Leucippus. 1618. The Rape of the Daughters of Leucippus, painted in 1618, is a monumental work by Paul Rubens that encapsulates the dynamism and theatricality of the Baroque. Inspired by Greek mythology, this painting narrates the abduction of the daughters of Leucippus by the twins Castor and Pollux. Created in the context of a Europe marked by religious wars, this work served as a visual reminder of power and authority, recurring themes in the 17th century AD. Rubens organizes the composition with dramatic balance. The women's bodies, arranged on a diagonal, contrast with the strength of the horses and the determination of the men. The painter captures the tension between the young women's resistance and the vigor of the twins, creating a visual narrative that invites the viewer to explore every detail. The texture of the skin, the light that highlights the muscles, and the folds of the fabrics are a testament to his technical virtuosity. This work is especially significant in Rubens' career because it demonstrates his mastery of moving composition and his ability to integrate mythological elements with a deeply human aesthetic. The rape of the daughters of Leucippus was a point of reference for later artists, who sought to emulate the energy and emotion captured in this canvas. As a final detail, art historians point out that the horses in this work were studied by Rubens from real models, which adds a surprising level of realism to the composition. This meticulous approach reflects his commitment to perfection in all aspects of his art. Number 4. The Three Graces. From the year 1630 to the year 1635. The Three Graces, created by Paul Rubens between 1630 and 1635, is one of the most emblematic works of Baroque art. This painting, created in the final stage of his career, celebrates feminine beauty and the exuberance of nature, recurring themes in his work. Set in the 17th century, after Christ, it reflects the rise of Flemish art as a manifestation of wealth and cultural sophistication. The work depicts the three daughters of Zeus, Euphrosyne, Talia, and Aglae, symbols of beauty, charm, and joy. Their naked bodies, painted with an almost tactile texture, are intertwined in a circular composition that suggests movement and harmony. Rubens uses a warm palette with golden and pink tones that highlight the sensuality of the figures. The idyllic landscape in the background, full of flowers and vegetation, underlines the connection between the graces and the fertility of the earth. This painting is a personal statement by Rubens about the perfection of the human body and its relationship with nature. At the same time, it is a demonstration of his technical mastery and his ability to convey emotions through form and color. The Three Graces is considered a key work in the transition from Mannerism to Baroque, and its influence extends to contemporary art. A curious fact is that Rubens painted this work on his rural property, Het Steen, where he spent his last years surrounded by tranquility. This explains the bucolic atmosphere of the scene and the attention to detail in the flora, which reflects his love of nature. Number 3. The Judgment of Paris. Circa 1636. The Judgment of Paris, painted around 1636 by Paul Rubens, is a work full of mythology and sensuality that illustrates one of the most famous episodes in classical literature. Inspired by Homeric texts, this painting represents the moment when Paris, a Trojan prince, must decide who is the most beautiful among the goddesses Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. This mythological scene was created in the context of the Flemish court of the 17th century, after Christ, where interest in classical stories coexisted with the grandeur of the Baroque. Rubens composes the scene with dynamic harmony, placing the three nude goddesses in the center of the painting. Each one displays an idealized beauty that reflects different attributes: the majesty of Hera, the wisdom of Athena, and the sensuality of Aphrodite. The use of warm colors, together with the velvety texture of the skin, highlights the artist's technical mastery. In the background, pastoral elements can be seen that frame the scene and add depth to the landscape. This painting is not only a display of Rubens' artistic virtuosity, but also a testament to his ability to reinterpret classical themes with a personal approach. His depiction of female figures, full of life and voluptuousness, influenced later generations of artists and consolidated his reputation as a master of the nude. As an interesting detail, Rubens is said to have used his second wife, Hélène Formant, as a model for one of the goddesses, which adds a touch of intimacy and humanity to this mythological work. This detail connects the epic narrative with the painter's personal life, offering a new dimension to his artistic interpretation. Number 2. The Elevation of the Cross. From the year 1610 to the year 1611. The Elevation of the Cross, created by Paul Rubens between 1610 and 1611, marks one of the most important milestones of the Flemish Baroque. Commissioned for the Church of St. Walburga in Antwerp, this work reflects the direct influence of his stay in Italy, where he studied the great Renaissance masters such as Michelangelo and Caravaggio. In the context of a Europe divided by religious conflicts, this monumental painting symbolizes the strength and sacrifice of Christianity, rooted in the 17th century after Christ. The tripartite composition presents a scene charged with movement and drama. In the central panel, Christ's body is lifted onto the cross by a group of men struggling with the weight of the wood. Rubens uses a powerful diagonal to emphasize the physical effort and emotional intensity of the scene. The anatomy of the characters, clearly influenced by the study of classical sculpture, is combined with theatrical lighting that highlights the tense muscles and heart-rending expressions of the participants. The significance of this work lies in its ability to fuse Italian artistic traditions with Flemish sensibility. Rubens achieves a perfect balance between the dynamism of the Baroque and religious devotion, capturing the viewer's attention and involving him in the narrative. This work marked the beginning of his prestige as a painter of large altarpieces, opening the doors to important religious commissions throughout Europe. A curious fact about this painting is the use of local models for the figures, which allowed Rubens to give his characters authenticity. In addition, the dog on the left panel, apparently a secondary figure, symbolizes loyalty, a detail that connects viewers with the moral values of the time. Number 1. The Descent from the Cross. From the year 1612 to the year 1614. The Descent from the Cross, created by the celebrated Baroque artist Paul Rubens between 1612 and 1614, represents one of the most significant moments in his career. This work was commissioned for the Cathedral of Our Lady in Antwerp, in the context of the rise of Counter-Reformation art in the 17th century AD. The painting, with its monumental composition and visual drama, sought to convey the profound pathos of the Passion of Christ, a recurring theme in Christian art of the period. 17th century Europe was a scene of religious and political transformations, and the Flemish Baroque was emerging as a key tool for reaffirming the values of the Catholic Church. Rubens employed a rich and vibrant palette, with warm, golden tones contrasting with the dramatic shadows that are distinctive elements of tenebrism. The central figure of Christ, depicted with striking realism, is surrounded by a group of figures who reflect a range of emotions: pain, compassion, and resignation. The distribution of the figures, arranged in an ascending diagonal, creates a dynamic movement that guides the viewer's gaze through the scene. The texture of the fabrics, the shine of the metal, and the anatomical details denote the painter's technical mastery. This work established Rubens as the undisputed master of the Flemish Baroque and set a standard of excellence for religious art of his time. His ability to combine technical virtuosity with deeply emotional narrative ensured his place in art history. The Descent from the Cross is not only a testament to his genius, but also to art's ability to move and transform the viewer. Among the most fascinating details of this work is the careful depiction of Christ's body. Rubens is said to have studied real cadavers in order to accurately capture the gravity of the inert body. This level of dedication allowed him to convey a sense of humanity in the divine figure, making the viewer feel part of the pain and hope of the scene. Thank you for watching our video. Subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. Give it a like, comment your thoughts, and share this video with your friends and family.